I have the great pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Jerry Wills. He has a very unusual background, something he will go into during his presentations, like how he came to stay on our planet and some of the information given to him by friends from other worlds. Jerry is also an accomplished healer, and as you can see from the program, he will also delve into this. He has also made numerous expeditions to South America together with his wife Katie, and during these expeditions have had contact with extraterrestrials. We are all looking forward to hear what he has to say. A great welcome to you, Jerry.
Hello everyone, I'm Jerry Wills. Tonight I'm going to be talking to you about something I think you'll find very interesting. Other people that I've spoken to about this, they found it interesting. It has to do with UFOs, contact with extraterrestrials, and a whole number of things that involve people from other worlds coming to this one. Why this happens? At least what I was told about it, and where we as a people on this world are going, what the possibilities are for you. The name of my lecture is called Earthbound, and the reason it's called that is because for me, a long time ago, 1953, I was deposited in an abandoned house in central Kentucky. I remember just vague images of this. Within 12 hours, there were officials who came to this place. At the time, in the United States, there was no Air Force. Instead, there was an organization within the Army that was called the Army Air Corps. They retrieved me from this place, and they took me to Fort Knox. And there I resided at the hospital, and I don't know for how long. I'm really not sure if it was 1953. It might have been 1952. I just don't know. Once I was in this hospital, I was taken care of. Because you see, the Army had been given a message that I was going to be placed there. But they got the time wrong. So instead of showing up at the appropriate time, they showed up 12 hours later, and I had frostbite over most of my body. I was not doing very well. So I remained in the hospital for a while. Eventually, there was a man who was in the armed services, in the Army. He and his wife could not have children. And the reason is because when she was younger, she was playing with something called radium. It's radioactive. And when you get it inside of you, it destroys your reproductive system. So they adopted me. Now, these things that I'm telling you are things that I found out much later in life, because when I was growing up, I had no idea why things were happening as they were. I had, excuse me, I had no idea that this wasn't my mother and father. I didn't look like them. I was very different. When I was about 3 years old, something happened and I got very sick. By this time, my family had moved from Fort Knox to Denver, Colorado. And in Denver, Colorado, he was given a job in the government. I became quite ill, and at that time, there were these people who showed up that I remember very vividly. They didn't look normal. They actually were about 5 foot tall, but they had large heads and black eyes. They were scary. But they seemed to know what they were doing, and so they treated me, and I got better very quickly. By the time I was 4 years old, my father and mother would take me to a place in outside of Miami, Florida, into the Everglades. I was told we were going there to meet with my Uncle Sam. So every year after this, we would go and meet with my Uncle Sam. We would go there and ride in a big black car. We would go out across the Everglades. We would get in a boat, and we would go down one of these channels of water, and eventually there would be these tents. There were soldiers. I was given a stick of gum, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was back in the hotel in Miami, and then we would go to the beach. This continued on for several years, until I was 7. At 7 years old, my father had a heart attack and died. And my mother moved from Denver back to Kentucky. But before this happened, officials came demanding that she give me to them. These officials were wearing black suits. Some of them had decorations. They were soldiers, high-ranking officials. And they wanted me. But she didn't let them have me. We moved to Kentucky, and that's where I grew up. From that point forward, life was very different, because we grew up really in the woods, away from everyone. And this is where things became much easier in relation to the extraterrestrial contacts. At the time, I didn't know that that was the case, but I learned this to be how it was later on. In Kentucky, there were a lot of UFO sightings. A lot of people were seeing things that they couldn't explain. And because of that, there was a lot of fear. And perhaps here in your country, this beautiful Norway, you might have been afraid of the Russians as well, I don't know. But in the United States, there was a very deep, foreboding fear that the Russians would come and conquer us, and nuclear bombs and all of these terrible things that we were told. There was a lot of fear because no one knew who the people flying the UFOs might be. They had no idea. I was 12 years old, almost 13. And one afternoon, a very, very large craft came out from the trees and presented itself in front of me. It was about a half a mile away, which would be about a kilometer, I think, maybe a little less. It was so large that it was hard to imagine that something like that could actually move against the wind and just float through the air. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this. And it sat there above the trees, and its lights were gently pulsing over and over. And in that moment, it gave me an inspiration, and I think a message. And it was very simple. The message was, "We see you. We'll come talk to you soon." You could see the moonlight glinting off of the shiny surface of this. It was massive. The very next summer, I went into the woods as I normally would. I was going to meet a friend of mine. He never showed up. Instead, there was a man who came and sat down and talked with me, but he was very strangely dressed. In Kentucky, it's very hot, and there's a lot of humidity. And this man was in a one-piece outfit that went right to his neck, long sleeves, long pants, that you couldn't tell where the pants ended and the boots began. He came up and knew me by name. He wanted to talk. So we had a short discussion. All the while, I had really no idea who he might be or why he would want to talk with me, but he seemed friendly enough, and why not? It was during this conversation that words were no longer used, and it was information that was transferred telepathically between he and I. And we had quite a nice conversation. But then he said he had to leave. And he stood up, walked away, and that was all. After this, there were these messages that began to show up. Not messages in words, but messages in a sound in my head. It was like Morse code. It was a beeping, whistling sound. And I understood that when I heard this, that I should go and take a look, because every time I heard it before, I would see a disc. You've probably heard of Billy Myers. It was a disc like this. And it was people like that. This disc would come and land back in the back fields, back in the trees. And I was not at first allowed to go close to it. Instead, they would come out and they would come and talk with me. These things that we would discuss at first were very general. There wasn't a lot of what I would consider to be earth-shattering information or really, really important things. It was more a discussion, a dialogue that between ourselves, what life was like. And you know, I'm 13 years old. I didn't really have a lot to say. After the first year, however, things changed. And when they would show up, then they would bring others with them. And these people would then become my teachers. They had information to share with me. And this information was shared in a very unique and unusual way. You know, when you have a memory stick and you plug it into your computer, how all the information can just be put in there and then suddenly it's in your computer. This is how they would provide information for me. It was as though they put this massive amount of communication directly into my mind. And I had no idea what it was. Just a lot of detail. It was shortly after this began that I started developing a very serious headache. It was what you might call a migraine. And when they showed up, and they were showing up every week, then I told them that this was hurting. I couldn't do this. It was still hurting. It didn't stop. They were quite alarmed, and they wanted to find out why. So they took me inside. I sat down in a sort of chair. It wasn't like a chair like you're sitting on now. Laid back, and they somehow took a look to find out what was wrong. I went to sleep, and when I woke up, they told me the problem had been resolved. You see, the issue was my left and right hemispheres needed to be linked together, and that would allow me to access everything that they were doing. After that, I never had any more headaches. However, at 15 years old, I had a photographic memory, and I was hungry for knowledge, and I would read everything that I could find. Dictionaries, I knew all the words. The encyclopedias, I read through all of them. It was boring. But I had a vocabulary that would stagger my teachers, and they didn't like it. I started reading everything that had been written by the greats. For example, everything written by Edgar Allan Poe, everything written by Shakespeare. I was studying music without the benefit of a music class or a music teacher. Everything. Everything that Einstein had done. Everything from Tesla. All the science and chemistry and mathematics books that I could digest. I was doing fourth year mathematics, college mathematics, in the 8th grade. And then all this information that they had been putting into my mind began to make sense. Now I had a framework because the mathematics was actually the key part of what they had given me. Without mathematics, there wasn't a whole picture. Instead, there were just fragments. But with the mathematics, now I understood. When I was 16, and I had amassed all this knowledge, they taught me the history of the universe. At least they're part of it. The universe is quite large. To know the entire history of such a large and large expansive place, I suppose, would be nearly impossible. But they taught me the history as they knew it. And then they went into sociology. The social structure of different worlds. This world, their world, and other worlds that are inhabited by people that look just like you and I. The geology, the atmospheric conditions, the religion. All of these things seem to be very important for them to teach me. Why? I'm not really sure. Maybe it's because they wanted to find out how much I could take in before I would explode. But I didn't explode, obviously, and I continued to amass more and more levels of knowledge. And then it went into another direction altogether. Some people call it a direction that involves spirituality. Some call it quantum mechanics. Back when I was 16, quantum mechanics was not a term that anyone was familiar with. It hadn't even been invented yet, so far as I know. But it went on to describe the rationale of the universe, how things work, and how we as observers are responsible for the outcome, and how we, collectively, direct the energies of the universe towards potential solutions or problems, and how either with apathy we allow things to degenerate and go stale, or because we have an active participation in the creation of the next moment together, collectively, that things change. And there were several examples of that, both for this world and for others. To finish off all of these things that they were teaching me, by the time I was 18 years old, I had been enlisted to play basketball because my stature, I'm 6'9". So they wanted me to be a basketball star. But I wasn't that interested. I couldn't understand the concept of the competition, because in the way that they were trying to show me how things work in an organized universe, and then the people who were showing me how I was supposed to play basketball with an enthusiasm to beat the other guy however badly I could, and then be very happy that I had beat them, that didn't make sense. It seemed illogical. So I was not a very good basketball player. I felt that if you're going to be in competition, it should be competition where everyone wins. Although someone does win, it doesn't have to mean the denigration of the people who've lost. It should serve as a template for them to also be able to win at some other point. That's not how it was seen where I grew up. It was beat 'em, live or die, black and white. There were no in-betweens. So I was not a very good basketball player, and I stopped playing. It was when I turned 18 that they told me that it was now time for me to go out into the world, to live among the others on this world, to understand what it's like to be here. That seemed like an odd way of characterizing a departure from home, but I didn't think anything of it. I was used to the way that they spoke to me. They wanted me to go out and be like everyone else. It's not that easy when you're as tall as I am, but I tried. And as I moved through life for the next several years, I was successful in business, and I did my best to improve myself as best I could. But I didn't do a very good job of it. They told me when they left at 18 years old that they would come and see me again in 10 years. Well, that seems like a very long time. But at the end of 10 years, they did show up, and in a very unusual way. Once again, the beeping sounds, and then a series of very vivid dreams where I was being shown to go to a place that I had never been before. I had no idea how I was going to get there, or even where it was for sure. But events transpired, and I found myself in the deserts of Nevada. This is an area we now call Area 51, Dreamland. But at the time, Area 51 was not generally known, and Dreamland was not even spoken of. I arrived in this remote place, an old ghost town. And a series of events took place there that were really quite bizarre and, well, a bit life-changing for me. You see, we were driving, I was with this other person, and we were driving back from Reno. That's where I met Brad Steiger. Tim Beckley had a UFO conference. I'd never been to one. I found it fascinating, and so I showed up there. And as we are driving back to Phoenix, the car runs out of gas, and we're stuck in this ghost town, and the fellow who's driving coasts into the filling station. In the filling station, there is a man who is dressed as though he just came off of a Hollywood movie. He looks like a cowboy with the hat and the boots and the shirt and all of this. And he comes out and says that, after we fill the gas, and George, the fellow who was filling the gas I was riding with, he can't find his wallet. And the fellow tells George, don't worry about it. It's at the other town that you stopped in several hours ago. I'll go get it. You wait here. And so we did. So as we're sitting there waiting, it never occurred to us, how would this man know where we had been, and how would he even know George's wallet? It was as though something was very cloudy in our minds. After about 30 minutes, I got up and started walking through this ghost town. And as I'm moving through the ghost town, I look in a window and I spot something shiny in the window. It turns out to be a crystal ball. I didn't bring it with me to show you. Because of airport security, sometimes they mishandle things. It's a very difficult thing to travel with. This crystal ball was sitting in a bowl, and as I walked inside of the building, this woman walks out who looks like she walked off of a Hollywood movie, like someone's grandmother. Has a nice apron, she has her hair up in a bun, little glasses, and she walks out and she says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was here. It looked like a ghost town." She says, No, it's all right. What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I noticed the crystal ball in your display case." And she grabbed her chest and says, "Oh my stars, you must be Jerry." And I said, "Yeah." She says, "They told me you were coming." "Yes." And she pulls the crystal ball out, she puts it down on the counter. And she proceeds to tell me that the people that I had had contact with during my teen years, who said they would be back in 10, had shown up there a couple of days ago and left it there for her to give to me. And she proceeded to tell me all the story about them and gave me enough information to where there was no doubt that she was talking about the same people. It was quite an extraordinary event for me, because after 10 years, your memory fades slightly. And even though it's so relevant and real, you look back on it as though, oh, do I remember this the way that I thought that I did? You've probably had the same thing. Well, she filled in many of the blanks and helped refresh my mind of all of these events that had taken place. I was astonished. It was so comprehensive that I decided I should record this. So I had a little pocket recorder. This was back in the early 80s. Had a little bitty cassette of tape and a little button you push. And so I started to record this conversation. She told me it was fine, but that I couldn't record her voice. I could only record my own. I didn't believe that. Well, as it turns out, I couldn't record her voice. So I put the recorder away. I was rather confused at that point because I know electronics quite well. I don't know how that could happen. She proceeded to tell me how to use this crystal ball, what it was meant for, and what could be done with it. Once all was communicated with me, this fellow that had gone somewhere, we don't know where, he shows up in the truck and he has the wallet. He gives it to George, who then pays him for the gas, and we leave. It's like the Twilight Zone, isn't it? We get out of town about 2 miles, and the car we're in chugs, and slows down and stops. We stop. Now what's wrong? We get out of the car and look around, and off to the right, down over there is where the old ghost town was at. And off to the right, from behind those buildings, 2 discs come out from the buildings. They proceed right across in front of us, go over some low hills, and then go behind the hills, and they're gone. 2 of them. Within seconds, there are jet fighters that are racing across the desert. You could hear them coming. And they were screaming across the desert. Not very high, maybe 200 feet off the floor. Dust was, it was really amazing to see. And they followed where the UFOs had gone. They were gone. Last we ever saw of either of them. Got back in the car, it started up. We came back to Phoenix. At that point, it would again be another 10 years. And there weren't that many unusual things that happened. I led a rather ordinary life. You see, I was married to someone who didn't like all of this, that didn't want to talk about any of this. Yeah, I got married in that period of time and thought that I was being foolish if I were to relate any of my experiences publicly. And I figured that it was interesting. And if someone wanted to hear it, that's fine. And she said, no, people are going to think you want them to believe it. I don't care if you believe it or not, I would say. Because it isn't important that you believe it, it's information. It's passing on details. Well, needless to say, the relationship didn't last. But another 10 years did pass. And at the end of that next 10 years, there were a few events that took place that were, again, quite unusual. It was the middle of the night, and there was an amber-colored light that we could see down the hall towards the front room. And it was dim, and then it was bright. And the next thing you know, she was worried and afraid and got up, and then she came back like she was in a trance, laid back down in bed, said, "It's nothing," laid down and went to sleep. But I could still see the light. So I laid there watching this. The light dimmed down again, and it was like in between the blinks of an eye, there was a man standing in our room. And there was just enough light from this dim amber light just down the hall that I could see his face, barely, and his stature, and I recognized him. His name was Zoe. He was the one who I'd spoken with all those years ago when I was a teenager. He had shown up and he wanted to have a discussion. So we talked. What we talked about at that point, again, was a life-changing event. He told me that there were some things that I needed to know, that they were very concerned, they being him and the others that he was affiliated with, that they were very concerned that it would have an emotional impact on me, that it might be damaging to my psyche. And I said, what kind of information could this be? And I felt very strong inside. He said, well, your mother is going to die in 2 months. And when she dies, there's going to be information that is going to surface. And it's about you being adopted. How do you feel about that? And I said, well, I don't look like anyone in that family. None of them have the characteristics that I have. They're so different from me. It's actually a relief. He says, but your mother is going to die in 2 months. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. But I never really felt like she was my mother. He says, all right, then I need to tell you the rest. From that point forward, he related to me where my origins begin, who I am, and in part, what I've been doing here all this time. This place is a planet that's not smaller or larger than Earth. It's similar to Earth. It's a place called Lanulos, and it orbits a star. Here, the star is called Tau Ceti. It's a place very much like this place. It has seasons, it has cold areas and warm areas. It has people just like you. It's just a different place. In the history that they had taught me about humankind and the people of this world and so forth, it was very clearly shown to me how people on this world didn't originate here. They were brought here, and they weren't brought here like, hey, come on, you're going to have to go or else. People came here because they wanted to, because it was another place, another outpost of humankind. And really, you're not human. But that's a whole different subject and a whole different story. You've been led to believe you are. But we'll call it humankind so we have a point of common reference. People like yourselves exist on many worlds out there in the cosmos. You don't know this because that information's been kept from you. But he went on to tell me that part of the reason why I was brought here, you see, I'm not unique in that respect. It isn't just that I was brought here and so that makes me special. It doesn't. You were brought here too in some past generational scheme. You see, there were a lot of people who were brought here as children. And the reason is quite simple. The last time there were things that were going to happen on this world, Well, there have been a few things that have happened. But the last time there was an attempt to alter human consciousness was a few thousand years ago. And there were not just the good guys, the people with good intentions towards humankind, but there were also the bad guys, those who were not very friendly at all and had other ideas. So they tried to alter the way people can see themselves and understand the world around them. And in doing so, they directly interfered. When they interfered, religions were born on both sides of the equation. This group interferes and they bring a message of peace, love, hope, and charity. So the other group comes along and they interfere just as overtly. And they bring a mission with them that tells, this is how you should live your life, and this is the structure, and if you don't, you die. Somewhere in time, this became cross-pollinated. And in cross-pollination, you now have a very severe attitude among those who are psychopathic, who are wanting to achieve states of power, to achieve dominion over those who would listen. And then they would have their colony. This is a very complicated thing to go into. But what it matters most to you is that who you are as people was diffused. Your understandings about who you are diffused. Your history, your true history, that goes back a very long time, obfuscated, hidden away. Because if you knew, you would be much more powerful than you are now. You wouldn't be individuals, you would be a community. And that would be dangerous to the people who are in power. So what Zoe was telling me is that there were a number of people like myself who were brought here, and that in their times past, when they came and tried to help and they put these pieces in place, religions sprung up and now they were considered gods. That couldn't happen again. The message was lost, but the messenger received the light and the attention. The message can be rewritten by those who hold the power. The messenger can become an icon. That couldn't happen again. Instead, their plan this time was to enlist the help of various other communities out among the stars who would allow for one of their children to be brought here, to live here, to mature here, and endure all the same things that the people who are born here would endure. You would learn to eat hot dogs and bratwurst and drink beer, smoke cigarettes, listen to really loud music, learn how to dance badly. But you'd also learn what it's like to be in a community of people who are just like you, and you would be just like them. The difference would be you did not start here. And when the time came and there was something that could possibly be done to help, it would not be help coming from the ETs. It would be someone standing by your side, just like you, who says, I think I know a better way. I have a different idea about this. Maybe I can point you in a direction. And there would be something slightly different about them, of course, because they are different. They can't help but be. And so that's how the plan was enacted and carried out. There were many of us brought here to countries all over this world. I just happened to land in the United States in a farmhouse back in the hills of Kentucky. But there are others. Some of them have yet to make their presence known. Others you might recognize if you knew who they were for sure. You might have actually some idea who they might be if you look at their actions. Because these people have no intention to become figureheads or icons. They simply want to bring information forward and to show that there are other potentials, that there are other ways, and the world can become more successful if, as a community, we work together. Zoe wanted me to understand this before he left, and he gave me another piece of advice. You see, my birthday is September 11th. And he always told me that my birthday was very, very special. Never forget it. He said there's going to come a point in time when the people of the world will be directed in one place or another. And in being directed, those choices will be made that will carry the world forward in either a direction of peace or war. Remember your birthday. It seemed a bit ominous when I was 17, and it seemed a bit uncomfortable when I was 38. I didn't really understand the dynamic that comprehensively until September 11th and the World Trade Centers came down. And at that point, suddenly I understood. The world had made a move, and it was not in a direction towards peace. It was to the contrary. Since that point in time, there have been very few contacts. There was a period of time of a few years in South America, and I'll be going into this, I think it's tomorrow, when I discuss and tell you about some of the events in South America that I have witnessed or heard about. There was a group of Pleiadians that became friends of mine, and they knew who I am. We had conversations over the course of several years. And there were encounters with other life forms, the ones that are the short gray ETs with the big dark eyes that don't seem to have your best interests at heart. And these, I'm not sure what they are or who they are. And I should know, but I don't. All I know is that they're not very friendly, and they don't seem to have a very good grasp on what it's like to be frightened. There were a few instances when I was approached in a very surprising way by them, and when this happened, I threatened them not to do that again. You see, one of the things that was provided to me during the time of those contacts in my teen years, something was done so that these individuals no longer had the ability to do mind entrainment on me. It works for just a few seconds and then it stops. To give you some idea what that means, if there were one of those beings here now, as many folks as there are in this room, they could instantly cause you to think that you were looking at, and then fill in the blanks. It could be a man, a woman, an animal, a clown. As soon as you look at them, they have you. And they'll cause you to see whatever it is that they want you to see. And you can't stop it. Not until they release you. mentally release you. And if there are more than one of them, and there usually are, then there'll be several of these characters, and you will find yourself eventually asleep, and you'll find that they have done something with you, but you're not sure what. Some people say that they put little tags on humans. Well, they do. Part of the other thing they do is they like to harvest humans. The sperm and the ovum. You see, on other worlds, these beings are also interested in the resources of other worlds, and they use people there to do the heavy lifting, to do the work. So they harvest what they need here, and they take the babies there, grow them, and these children become adults, and these adults see these creatures as gods. And you can see evidence that that's happened here as well. It isn't unique to other worlds any more than it is unique for this one. You hear about cattle mutilations and black helicopters and all forms of strange and somewhat scary things in this regard. That's them. And you might say, well, why don't our governments protect us against them? Our governments cannot protect us against them because they hold the power. To give you some idea, if they wanted to, they could open a doorway, and I use that term figuratively, but it's like a rip in the fabric of space. They could open a doorway and just appear right here, and instantly you would be looking at them and you would just not even be able to blink. They would do what they want, then they would leave, you would blink, and it's like no time had passed. Our governments can't protect you against that any more than they can protect the people in the governments from having it happen to them. You wonder why things are so terrible. It's because these are the people who are in control. They run this world. They have for a very long time. They and others like them. So, the reason why many of us who are here is to help you understand some of these things. Not that it's to change your mind or get you to believe anything, but to just give you information. The other part of this, if you do believe, then it's time to stop believing and know. Because there's a big difference between believing and knowing. But the only way that you're going to know is if you find within yourselves what resides there. That spark that's there. Now, you might be a person who's a mechanic, or you work on computers, or you might be a farmer, or you might be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever, fisherman perhaps. Doesn't matter what you do. What's really important is who you are. But in order for you to know, then you have to come to terms with a few ideas that reside within me and reside within you. I know these things about me, but I want to help to show you these things about you. Being from another world is not nearly as important as being from this one, because this is where the troubles are. Being from somewhere else, I was from somewhere else before I arrived here a few days ago. It wasn't that big a deal to be from Arizona. It shouldn't be that big of a deal to be from another planet. It's just another place. The big deal is that we are here now and we have the potential to know ourselves, finally. To discover that bit of truth that resides within ourselves, that gives us a link that goes back a very long way. It leads us on a path that takes us to the stars, that moves us into another light, that moves us into a place where once we know ourselves, we're no longer disempowered, but we become empowered. Individually, we're like the old thing I saw in a movie once. You know, the one where they have a straw. You know what a straw is, like straw from the field. And they have one straw and bends it over and breaks it. But you put together 100 straws, and it's very difficult to break. It's that way. Maybe even more powerful. Because you see, there is something called synergy. With a straw, you don't have synergy, you have mass. And the greater the mass, the more power it takes to cause the mass to change. With synergy, the greater the mass, well, the synergistic aspect of this becomes 1,000 times greater, perhaps. Maybe more. Think of it this way. Have you ever bent a spoon, just focused on it and caused it to bend over? Anyone here? There's someone, another. Anyone over here? Yes? All right. If you haven't, then just imagine it for a moment so you understand this concept. You have a spoon, you focus on it, it bends over. Pretty much just like that. Effortlessly. A thick, heavy spoon. What if everyone in this room could bend a spoon? Just like that, and do it by yourself. But you decided that, what's the big scary thing? Ebola. You've heard about Ebola, right? Well, imagine if everyone here could bend a spoon. This is the synergy. What if everyone said, we don't need this Ebola crap anymore. Let's just use all of our energy together and focus and just get rid of it. You could do that. Everyone is looking for a mechanical means to defeat the issues. Got to go through a mountain, you're going to need to have a big hammer. But that's not how it was done in ages past. And it's not necessary to do it that way now. The synergistic approach is to combine the energies of who you are and to apply that in one single formidable thought to effect a change. This is something that I possess. This is my work as a healer. But it's also something you possess as well. It's not unique to me. It's only unique because I can show you how it's done, that it's possible, and that's what you need to see. But it isn't unique to me. You also possess these same traits. I might recently have come from another world, recently 60 years or more, but you did too. And the same aspect of creation that runs through me, that causes me to work on a person with a bad shoulder or a back or a terrible cancer, and changes occur. Amazing changes. That same energy runs through you as well. And that's part of the reason why Zoe came to see me that last time, is to let me know that the time is now, that we can change the things that we don't agree with, that are frightening, that threaten us. And there are others who are like me, maybe some of you in the audience, maybe some of you who are watching. And all you have to do is just stand up and be counted. Be who you are, not who you've been told you should be. So I'll open the floor to questions at this point, and then we'll go a little step further from that. Any questions? All right, there are no questions. Yes.
Will they give you an opportunity again to go back to your home planet when you so choose to? I mean, is it a great little choice that you've come here and you're doing wonderful work, and thank you for being here today. Really, you've done a wonderful gift to us to raise consciousness. But have they said that you, at some point, can you go back to your home planet?
So the question is, do I have an opportunity to go back where I came from? The answer is I've been given the opportunity a couple of times, and I've declined both times. And the reason, this is a place that's worth the time and effort. The people here are good people, really. And there's no reason to leave. If I left, what would I do? What would I do? If I left, it would be because I was afraid, or I'd given up. I'm not afraid, nor have I given up. I have hope, and I believe, I don't know yet, but I believe, that the best is yet to come. So I have not decided to leave.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for your...
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You had a question? I can't understand you. I'm so not...
I have got chips on my body from Saturn, and I'm wondering, what do you think about them? What is that?
I don't know.
They're from the corn, and corn also.
Are they reptilian implants? Is that what you have? Are these...
No, I mean, if they are squirrel in my hands, and I'm wondering, the man here said he can take the chips away from me, and I began to cry, and I don't know what it means. Also, my youngest daughter had screamed up and got the chips.
Oh, the implants.
I think she has implants. That's what she...
I can show you.
Sure, we're talking about implants, and she's asking me, I think, what I can say about this. Is that right?
Get rid of them.
To get rid of them.
You can take it away.
I can ask to be taken.
Yeah, but I'm so happy. But I'm wondering, what do you think about them from that one? I have much trouble at my house, and I'm an alternative and very open, and I don't like to.
Well, that's,
At all.
electricity
I believe she's a victim for the grace. That's what I think.
that's what I'm getting as well.
Yeah, she's getting implants.
Well, there have been several instances where I've encountered mostly women, only one man, women and their children. Usually it's a female child that are tagged and are visited frequently. And it's very disappointing when this happens. Usually I get involved. There's a way of changing these things. It doesn't have to be like this. So, consequently, I'm not trying to make you a promise I can't keep, but if you would like, I'll take a look and see if there's something I can do to change it, I will. If you don't want these people bothering you, then they shouldn't bother you.
I am not so sure because I have got money gift from God from I have in Sweden and also I can hear and not so much now because I write a book of my life and my life was very difficult and angels and everything got I know everything's happening and when it's happening and so on and I cry out for God and say take that away from me.
Well,
That I should not do. When I wake up the next morning my hearing was much lower and every of my gift was away. Now they are coming back a little to me.
mm-hmm.
And I also have prayed to God and say, I'm so sorry that I said that before. And I have a very, very strong feeling. I always have.
Well, perhaps we can talk more.
Yes, but I'm wondering, when you take away the chip,
Mm-hmm.
is that the influence in my gift or
Maybe it was,
watching me?
I have no idea. I would have to look to see. We shall. You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes.
You said there was a life-changing or changing. You said that there was a change in direction about 9/11
Mm-hmm.
when the World Trade Center, and that have you lost the contact, physical or mentally, after that, or is it still continuing?
No, the contact that I have continues. It is not the same as it was before.
In what way did it change?
Every 10 years they would come to see me, and now it's at a different interval.
But it is still the same kind of information and what you are going to tell the world or as an audience?
Well, the information that they gave me is the information I'm telling now. The information hasn't changed. They gave me information that went in either direction. If the world went towards peace, then there was a line of information that would go in that direction. If it did not go towards peace, then unfortunately, it was a different message.
But you are changing the way now.
I am changing the way, well, I've changed the way since, several years now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Is there any way to try to attain a state where you can sort of resist mental confusion
The question is there a method to keep the state of mental confusion that is created by the grays?
No, or keep it away, like you have like booking.
There is, but it isn't something I can describe it very easily. The thing to remember about the grays is that they want to get you pulled in and relaxed, so you'll release your free will. If you don't release your free will, there's nothing they can do. But you have to be aware. To be aware is not a state of consciousness. It's a state of presence. And if you're going to be aware, you have to practice awareness. It's when you're not aware that they can use you, and they can put you into a place where they can manipulate you. But if you're not aware, well, then they can use you very easily. The things that cause the greatest problem, and these are things you might have heard, they're very common things: fear and a lack of confidence. If you're afraid, you're vulnerable. If you weren't vulnerable, you wouldn't be afraid, right? If you were confident, you'd have nothing to fear. So these are aspects of how to maintain a level of awareness so you're not manipulated. And it isn't just the grays who are attempting to manipulate you. There are others out there as well. And they certainly don't have your best interests at heart. Other questions? Any comments? Yes.
I noted 4 words: peace, love, hope, and charity.
Yes.
Through your communication, have you sensed any kind of negative aspects? These are positive.
Any negative aspects from the folks that I was talking with? Yes, there was apprehension and concern. See, one of the things that as I've gotten older, I've reflected back on these events. And it sounds very pleasant and altruistic from how they presented themselves to me. Very nice, very friendly, we want to help you, blah, blah, blah. But how is it that they would know the things that they knew? They showed me images from the future. How could they do that? They told me things that were going to happen. How would they know that? And they had a concern that if things didn't happen in such a way that it was going to become very ugly. How would they know that? So while on the surface, these contacts seemed to be beneficent and pleasant, there was something beneath the surface that wasn't. And I think it was concern. Because whatever they saw in the future, however they managed the future, and I think I understand what they did. I don't know how they did it, but I think I understand what they did. I think they knew things were going to go very ugly. And they moved back through time to try and set the course in a different path. And I don't think it worked. I don't know why it didn't. Maybe it worked a little. Some of the things that I've seen have not taken place. Other things, yes, they've taken place and they're quite ugly. 9/11, for example. So who are these people really? Because there comes a point where you have to ask that question. You know, from the future, Or did they go to the future and come back? Or what is the story? It's a very confusing thing to rationalize. And I wonder, because I don't know. But even the people I spoke to who were from the Pleiades, they had a very similar circumstance. Part of the way we worked, in other words, here's how it worked. I was taking people to South America, tours to see Peru. Amazing places. They approached me. We are scientists, sociologists, anthropologists, and we are studying people. We want to be able to talk to your people, the groups that you bring. We want to talk with them, just visit, that's all. So, I said, all right, I don't see any problem with that. Well, and you can't tell them who we are, because that will make things different. They know that we're from the Pleiades. They're not going to talk to us like we're just normal people. It has to be quiet, kept secret. After you get home, then you can tell them. So I did. They said there are others who are here who would want to use you. You have to be careful about them. So how will I know who you are? Because every time I'll tell you three things. A near future event, another future event that's a few months down, and a distant future event that's several months down. All right, that sounds fine, I said. Wondering how it is that they would know these things, of course, but, well, we've heard the information, the Billy Myers information, the things that we've been told. We don't know if it's true or not, but time travel with the Pleiadians, so sure, why not? And every time they would give me three events, and these three events were exactly what they said they would be, right to the day. And how would they know? How would they know these things if they couldn't move through time? And if they can move through time, why would they choose this particular time? And if this is the case, where they can move through time, did they bring me from another time and plant me here at a very specific point in time? And am I really from another world? Or from another time? Or both? I probably went off on a tangent, sorry. But this is an inner dialogue I have with myself from time to time. Other questions? Yes?
Yes, I would like to ask you about what's happened in England sometimes during the spring and summer sometimes. It's the corn circles.
Oh, the crop circles.
That, in the beginning it was human-made, but corn circles geometrical, so sophisticated made. What's that? There was so many people who asked what's that? You know anything about that?
No, I don't. It's a great mystery, and I appreciate a deep mystery of this nature. I think we know that there's something very mysterious happening with that, and it does not involve people from this world. Where they're from, I have no idea, but I am very curious about it, just as most other people are as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes?
What's the deal with the crystal ball you were given?
More specifically, refine your question.
Okay. What have you done with it since you got it?
Since I got it, I used it to manifest a few things. It was a tool that was meant to show how to use this tool as an external means of doing something you should be able to do inside. But to get me to the point where I could, This was a tool to show me how it's manifest. It also has a star chart inside of it. It's perfectly clear optically, and it has some bubbles placed in there as a star chart. It's been looked at by a couple of scientists, Brian O'Leary and Harry Stein. Both are very interesting folks. Both now are passed away, unfortunately. But it was figured that it wasn't made on this world. That whatever the material is it's made of is not glass, but they don't know what it is. So that's the deal with the crystal ball.
So it's a tool to teach you
Mm-hmm.
to do things, and now you don't need it.
No.
To do those things.
No, I just have it.
So you don't need it anymore.
Not necessarily, no. But I haven't given it away either. I know. And I was thinking about that when we were getting ready to come here. The last time I took the crystal ball with me anywhere was to New York. And the people that are in the security would take it out and handle it like it was a dead fish. So I don't want it to be scratched or damaged, and they have no respect for such a thing. So yeah, I'm sorry I didn't bring it, but I couldn't.
I understand.
Others? Yes.
I actually have three questions. You said other people like you were brought here as children.
Mm-hmm.
You recognize them at any point, and you found. And the second question is, how are your people different from place to place? And then the third question is, Brian Forrester has discovered these elongated skulls in the south of I don't know.
Peru.
Yeah. And do you know anything about them? Where they come from? What kind of people they are?
Let's start with that one first. Brian Forrester covered that story after we completely covered it a few years earlier. If you go to expeditions.tv, you can look at Secrets of the Sand. We were putting out news information about that probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years earlier. Pretty much everything that we put out information about, Brian Forrester then puts out information about it. The people that were there were not from this world. What we discovered is that there are plates in the skull. Some of their heads were wrapped, but not all of them. There are some that were truly unique, and they were a completely different race. And these people have a different bone structure in their head. But if you look at Secrets of the Sand, you can see some of those details on that video of ours. It's for free. It's on the internet. You can watch it anytime in HD and stereo. What was your second question? I'm sorry. Oh, the difference between our people and the people of the Pleiades? It's as different as a regional difference between places here on Earth. What are the differences between people in Norway and people in the deep south of the United States? Quite a bit. But between the Pleiades and the people of my world, it's just a cultural difference, really. You have different climates in these places, and you have different food and a different philosophy on life in some ways. And the first question was?
How do you recognize the other people that work here?
That was one of the things that was kept from us, was being able to recognize each other. It was later related to me that people have a tendency to collect with each other. You see, during the time that we were in our teen years was the time, in the United States anyway, when the Vietnam War was winding down. There was a lot of people in the hippies and the peace movement, and a lot of folks were wanting to get out of the establishment and get into something much different. because we had unique abilities, whether it was intellectual or psychic, I suppose what they figured they would do is they would keep us from recognizing each other so we didn't come together as a collective and then just decide to leave society completely. Because I think that if we hadn't recognized each other during those days, we would not have had the wisdom to have made a choice that would have kept us on our task. Instead, we would have gotten together and said, this is crazy, this world is insane, and we would have just left. Since that time, I recognize a few here and there, but the older I get, the more I understand that it isn't important. The only thing that's important is that we understand who we are to ourselves. How the world sees us should be a true reflection of what we see within ourselves, not a mask that is here because someone gave it to us and this is what we're supposed to be when we're out in the world at large. There's a lot of that in the States. I don't know if it's here, but I suspect that it's everywhere. Finding who you are and becoming that, only that, is the greatest gift you can give to yourself. And it's the greatest gift that you can give to the rest of the people who you might encounter. Just being you. Does that answer your question? You're welcome. Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Share with you that I have met reptilians in Greece, but they cannot touch me. I have found a method that is working for me to fight back. I think that I might stop you. I don't promise. I have to try. If you want, I can go to the wall.
Well, that would be beautiful.
I have experienced that I meet them. I don't meet them anymore. They don't come to me. They know that I'm too strong for them. But I have experienced that I have made white platform around it. And that is not possible for anyone to enter without working.
Well, that's a state of awareness that we're talking about. And what she's saying is that she has had experiences with reptilians and the Greys, and through her own methods have devised a way to keep herself safe and secure and to keep them away from her, yes? And she's going to share that information with this beautiful lady.
Thank you, Martin, on my soul in Selena. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes. Yes. Yes, we've been looking for portals. I'm having trouble hearing you specifically.
I saw on your bed.
Yes.
Find the portals, you should visit the portal.
Mm-hmm.
I will go try to get through it, and how far you get, how far you get, or will come back again, and then go further.
Yes, well, there's one called Aramamuru. I'll be covering part of that story tomorrow. And it is a portal. It's kind of difficult to explain. According to Dr. Michio Kaku, it is a type of bidirectional wormhole. But I'll go into that in more detail tomorrow because I did manage to turn it on, and it was staggering. Yeah, I didn't like it. Anyone else? Yes.
And thank you for coming, sharing. I have a question because, or maybe, yeah, it's a question. At a few small times when I've been quiet and in meditative state, I have had contact telepathically with this gray kind of human, just by listening. And the only thing I could do then was to send them love, just one at a time. And I said, you are my king, and I send you my love, and that's it. And I tried to close. And I have told this to a friend of mine, and she said, oh, you are too naive, you can't do that. But I don't have any other form to protect me from this kind of interference, or they try to come into my mind in a very pleasant way. Do you have anything to say to that? Please?
That's a very good thing. Good question, good statement. Yes, I have something to say about that. You know, when you consider who you are, maybe it's time to consider actually who you really are, not who you appear to be, or what other people think you are, or when you look in a mirror, what you see. Because you look in a mirror, you see all the flaws, right? I do. Look at this, all these flaws. And who you consider yourself to be, who do you think you are? And you say your name, and you see yourself, I recognize myself, these are my hands. And your friends, wouldn't they be surprised if they saw you as someone different? Or your husband, or your daughter, or your son, or whatever. The point is that we become who others expect us to be. And in doing this, we slightly alter ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it's necessary in a society to slightly shift one way or the other. When you're wanting to protect yourself against these cosmic forces, the bad guys, or the evil, or the darkness, or whatever, quite often we look outside for some support. Some people are looking for God out there. Some people are praying to God out there. Some people are going, I need to bring the light in. I need to bring in the white light. How many of you do that? And it's fine. But I think it's time to now take another step forward. Take a step, one more step a little higher than where you've been. God isn't out there. You can't find God out there any place. I've looked. You find God here. And if you go looking for God in this direction, inside, you find yourself, and you eventually find God. But you can't tell where the boundary lines are, because where you are and where God is, there are no set places. It's all a mixture. And that's why you can look at yourself in a mirror and point to yourself when you're looking in the mirror. You say, God lives here. Because that's where you find God first. I don't know what God is. I've been trying to figure this out for a very long time. Never come to a resolution on this at all. In other worlds, they have their own ideas about what God is. But it all comes down to the same thing. It's a presence. So God lives here. And this is something they taught me. So it isn't unique from me. This is part of their philosophy, let's say. So you're wanting to protect yourselves. You want to bring the light, and you want to be protected, but the white light around you, right? Or the violet light, or whatever kind of light there is. Why not just be who you are? Become the light. And all these things that are out there that are frightening and disturbing, and the grays that are coming and they're trying to do something to you, they have also a connection to the Creator, to whatever God is. If God lives here and you become the light, you no longer have to worry about the darkness coming close. Because there isn't any darkness. There's your presence. And it doesn't make you great, and it doesn't make you famous, and it doesn't make you any more special than you already are. But what it does do is it allows the people who see you to understand and to find it within themselves. You light the path for others just because of being here. You're never going to be perfect, and you're never going to walk this path without stubbing your toes or falling down once in a while. I've done plenty of that, and I'm not from here. So, of course, it happens to everyone. No one is perfect. We all have our issues. But when you realize who you are, and then you live as though that were the truth of your existence, then the light that you give off is the light everyone else is looking for and hasn't quite found yet. And it's not your light they're looking for, it's their own. They just don't know it. You want to do great things? You want to keep these things from bothering you? It's awareness. As I said before, it's confidence. But it's confidence in you and awareness of who you are. It's that state of being godlike with each breath you take. They can't touch you unless you allow them to. So that's my advice. Yes?
I'm sorry, but can you please come here and he can also feel it's so very cold. I feel like this and I'm freezing, it's blowing, and it's like a big place here. It's not good. I don't know.
She's saying that it's very cold here.
Yes, here. Can you feel it? You can also feel it cold. He can also feel it.
It does feel cold there. Well, then change it. Any other questions? Anyone else?
Thank you.
Yes.
There's a lot of talking about the great.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion and what's your experience about? Are they different? Are they all bad guys, or are they some even good guys that look like the great?
Yeah, good question. Well, there are two different classifications. There are those that are short and gray. They're maybe 3.5, 4 foot tall. But there's another group that's about 5.5 foot tall. They're not really gray. They're kind of a whitish blue color, actually. And they're a bit indifferent. They don't really have an emotional state. They're more of a classification of creature that you would say is between reptile and insect. They don't have an emotional state of being like we do. But they're not malevolent, the tall ones. The small ones, there's something very unusual going on with these because there's more than just them. There's at least 3 other races that are involved with them. And some people say that they are genetically created, that they're grown. I don't really think that's the case. But I don't know for sure, so I can't tell you with certainty. There are those who say that they are slaves to some other entities. Well, maybe so. But in my experience, they didn't seem like slaves. They do have a connectivity to one another very similar to ants. You're welcome. Yes, in the back. I'm not hearing you very well.
Can you say something about the motivation of the lesser bad, the lesser good agents?
I don't understand. Can someone tell me what he said?
Motivation.
Motivation?
Yeah, what's the motivation for being in a narcissistic asshole or something? What's their motivation for being negative?
Oh, the Greys? Oh, I thought you meant me in particular. Just kidding. Well, what is their motivation? It's the same as it is in many other parts of this world. The motivation is service to self. They live within a hive mentality, and that hive mentality means that they have a hive agenda. And whatever that agenda is, the ones that are needing to do it will go out and do it. You know, there are some beings out there who look at the people of Earth as no more than you might look at a bunch of sheep walking around the field, or a bunch of ants crawling on the floor to be stepped on. They haven't any compassion, any caring, and they don't seem to have any desire to improve their view. And there are others who are out there who don't care one way or the other. Live or die, doesn't matter. It's just a fascinating thing to see. So the motivation, you find in the universe, typically, motivation is either created as a view of service to self or of service to others. And at some crossroads in there, in a balanced society, you find that there are those who exist with a foot in each world. That's where we are in this world. Service to self, service to others, and we try to vacillate between the two in order to find a common ground within ourselves. That's the separated aspect of one human to another. When it comes down to a connective and collaborative approach, it will go in one direction or the other more severely, depending upon the attitude of those involved. And it's one of the reasons why I haven't taught some of the more advanced things that I know. I'm still waiting to see how it's going to go before I go that far. Does that answer your question? Ah, another. All right. Anyone else? I'm sorry, I'm all out of answers, though.
The last war, the Galactic War,
Mm-hmm.
who actually won that war? Or was it even? The direction of that is actually splitting the world completely. If you have an agenda who's actually evil, I mean, an agenda who's trying to help us with a good one, it must come, something must come from that Galactic War. It has been for many centuries.
Well, the Galactic War, what's that? I was going to say, what happened to this world after that conflict concluded? This world was left as a lonely little outpost far, far from everything else. Technology fell into ruin. There were no resupplies. There were no mechanisms to repopulate the technological portion, and it kind of fell into ruin. But what you see is evidence of what had existed and what they had done. And this is prior to 47,000 years ago. So it'd be older than 47,000 years. After the things that took place occurred, the Ice Age, the tilting of the Earth, the comet hitting North America, people became less and less sophisticated, because when it comes right down to it, it might be nice to have an iPhone, but when all you have left is to seek out a warm place to live, water to drink, and some sort of food to eat, all of the things fall by the wayside. And has happened on this world many times. Only a few survived. And it's during those times that others saw an opportunity to come to this world and use it. And sometimes they had good intentions, but not usually. War does that. I hope that helps to answer your question. Yes?
What is your opinion on the work of Stephen Greer?
Well, Stephen Greer's doing admirable work, I suppose. There was a point where I kind of lost confidence in him myself, but that's no reflection on anything but my opinion. Remember I told you about the Pleiadians in South America? Well, I invited him to have a meeting with them. He didn't want to talk to me even a little. He basically told me to get away from him. So I figured if he was really interested in having contact with extraterrestrials, he might want to come along. So I figured there must be some other agenda there that I'm just not sure of. So I don't have any other affiliation with him or any greater of an opinion than that. Anyone else?
Yeah. Have you been given any knowledge of what's going on the moon?
Ah, on the moon. Well, very good question. The moon is not what you think it is. At least if you think it's just a planetary body circling the Earth. There are too many circumstances about the moon to be denied. The moon basically is a giant ship. Like a battle station, I suppose. It's a good observation point. And it has been used by many races over the centuries and centuries, millennia perhaps. used, abused, abandoned, reoccupied, fought over. Yeah, it's quite an interesting place. And it is a planet, a planetoid. It is a rocky thing. But consider its orbit, its size, and how specific those things are to give us the opportunity for eclipses. The scientists would have us believe that that's just quite a peculiar thing. It happened naturally. I don't buy it, especially after the things that I've seen. So, no, I don't think that it's just an object. I think it's actually an observation point for whomever it is that wants to watch at any given time. Yes?
Peculiar enough, I saw this video about a Japanese scientist who wants to remove all the space junk from around the planet. Said there has been a no-manned mission beyond that belt of rubbish around the Earth since 1972. So the moon has been free play over the last 42 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and there are things out there orbiting the Earth that still are quite old. Have you heard of something called the Black Knight? For you who haven't, it's a very strange craft that is in orbit around the Earth. It has been for a long time, and I know very little about it, except that it's been there for ages. Yes?
I read somewhere once it was from the Atlanteans. Put it up there a long time ago.
Yeah, well, it very well could be from the Atlanteans. I tend to think that it was up there greater than 50,000 years ago. It's just a feeling that I have. It was never anything that was mentioned to me during my contacts, so I can't really address it. But just a feeling that I have that it's quite old, and I think that it's quite valuable for what it contains and the information that might be there and the reasons why it is in place. Anyone else? Sure.
How advanced are the American dark organization up in space technology? Have you been out visiting other planets, other planet systems?
How advanced are...
Are what you call the black budgets?
Oh, the black... Oh, well, I have no idea how advanced they are, but... Well, yeah, of course. I mean, the things that they're doing now are about 20 years in our future. So, you know, the black budgets, budgets for spacecraft and other things of that nature, you know, they're way advanced. I don't know that with any certainty, but it's my suspicion. Anyone else? Yes.
What do you think about earthly governments having had bases on Mars in the 1960s?
I'm not surprised that's the case. Some of these doorways that we found, and not that we found a lot, but we found 2 or 3 that one works, the other one works pretty well. The third one we're not really sure about. But these are ways of going from here to other worlds. So, yes, sure. But the reality about what's going on Mars is a much different story than what most know. And it has to do with a few cosmic catastrophes and Mars losing its atmosphere to a comet. And when the atmosphere was pulled away, the water evaporated, and what little was left over went underground or sometimes surfaces. But the people on Mars were very much decimated. And the atmosphere here on the Earth was also sucked away. But there was enough that remained that we could still have life here. And it changed everything when this happened. But the people on Mars, the world there and the world here were just two different worlds. They were doing just fine. Not that there weren't issues, but there were people who lived there. And when this came through and destroyed that world, well, evidence of their society, of their existence, it remains. And the people who are there now, well, I think that the reason why is because they discovered these portals between the Earth and Mars and Earth and other places. These portals don't have a distance restriction. Let me give you an idea on how this works. You're familiar, do you want to know this? I mean, this is going into a bit of physics.
Yes.
Is everyone okay with this? All right. Simple concept. You have a particle that's called a photon. You've heard of this, right? And it's moving through this region. There's a bunch of them hitting me right now. Doesn't hurt too much. They bounce off. That's why you can see me. The photon is moving through this space. According to Einstein, you cannot see the photon, you can only see the evidence of it. If you started moving parallel with the photon, you would have to go faster and faster and faster until you reach the speed of light, correct? The general theory of relativity suggests that when you reach this point where you're traveling the same speed as this photon, as you get closer and closer to that speed, time slows down. Right? When you achieve the speed of the photon and you're going along with it and you're looking and there it is. It's right there. It's just moving right along with it. Time is now at 0. That's what's being suggested. That's what's being shown in measurements. If time is at 0, is that the singularity? And if time is at 0, how far is over there? It's at 0. There is no over there. You get to the point where you're at this point, that you're moving the same speed, time and distance do not exist. So each photon is a state of singularity. A black hole, bidirectional or otherwise, is accelerating the singularity to the point where it just vanishes. Well, it vanishes because nothing can escape a black hole, right? When you go between worlds and you hit that singularity aspect, the distance from here to Mars, here to Lanulos, or any other part of the known universe or unknown universe, there is no distance. So the whole concept that we have of taking me 2 days to get here from Phoenix, or you 5 hours to go from here to the southern part of Norway, all of that is in a totally different realm. In order to understand this kind of physics, you have to think well beyond that. So you go into the realm where you're at the point of singularity. What directs you at the point of singularity? And this is where the aspect of God comes in handy. Because at this point, it's thought that moves faster than the photon. And it's thought that it's the causal agent in the universe to manipulate and control everything beneath it, what we call matter. Photons are part of that matter. So when you want to look at how you go from point A to point B out there through a wormhole to get from here to Mars or here to wherever, you're looking at an aspect that requires more than just rocket fuel and a lot of air to breathe and hope you have plenty of water you can recycle. Not to mention food. Instead, it is a process where the observer becomes the point where reality is challenged, manipulated, controlled, altered, and then reformed around the person who is observing. And that's why I was saying earlier, if you want to change the world, do it synergistically. Bend a spoon, great. Get together, change the world just by thinking. Because this is an observer-based reality, and you are the observers. Does that help to answer your question? Super. Anyone else? All right, very good. One more person. Go right ahead. Yeah.
You previously told us about your teachings involved Nikola Tesla workmanship, and I'm researching his work since many decades. And my question is that actually his biggest inventions were the cold fusion and the zero-point energy. Either of them would dramatically change our world in a best way. Since there are other good guys amongst the ETs, would they help us to get these inventions? Because the American government just closed it down. Even according to many opinions, Tesla was assassinated. So maybe you have some information about the future. Will we have the chance to get these inventions? Because in this case, we will be detached from the oil-based, fossil-based energies. So
that's very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, to answer you in a very brief way, yeah, there's going to be opportunities. And the people from out there, are they interested in seeing that we achieve this? Of course they are. They're not going to hand it to us, but they have handed us the details on how to discover it for ourselves. You see, one of the things that they told me was that when you give somebody something of great value, it's appreciated, thank you very much, and it might be abused later because there was no wisdom involved in its creation. Nuclear energy was one of these situations. Nuclear energy was provided by a race that were only interested in compounding the problem. But if you are given information on how you can do it, it becomes yours. And then if your friends or someone over here or someone over there says, oh, and if you do this, it makes it better. Now it becomes everyone's. It's the free sharing of information without ownership. Some consider that to be altruistic. But the reality is, we're at a point on this world where we don't have a choice any longer. There are things happening, and I'm sure you're aware of them. Fukushima is just one example. But you take a look at the oil companies, the pharmaceutical companies, and it might not be happening here in Norway, but in other parts of the world, the soil is being depleted and poisoned. And genetically modified corn and wheat, even animals, are being propagated and brought farther and farther into the food chain. These are things that will destroy you. Maybe not you personally. It'll destroy your children. It'll keep them from being able to have children. So, this is a time when something has to be done. And can it be done on a planetary scale? Probably. But the only way it's going to happen is with the synergy, the synergetic application, personality to personality, person to person, with a common goal and a common desire. And if you find something that will bring about a change, that gives you free energy, it can't be yours. It's like when Kathy and I take a look in the jungles or the mountains in South America, and we find a large cache of golden artifacts and bones with gold chains or silver or whatever. But we could be very, very rich. But we leave it. It isn't ours. It belongs to the world. And if you find a way of doing something that helps, then share it with others. And others who are looking, if you happen to be in that audience and you're observing this, it's time to stop thinking, why is he doing that? What's his angle? It's time to stop being suspicious. It's time instead to be part of a community of interested people who want to survive. Now, that might not be the case here about the suspicions, but I guarantee you in other places it is. There are people working on the Cyril effect engine that have a working prototype. I interviewed them on my radio show, the chief R&D engineer, several weeks ago. That's something that's a game changer. If you're not familiar, research it. Cyril, S-E-A-R-L, Cyril Effect Generator, John Cyril. And that's just one thing. There are hydrogen generators for attaching these to vehicles so the vehicles can run off of hydrogen. Some people have done quite well with this. Those who've done remarkably well are dead. There are those who don't want this information out there. So, instead of one person having it, and they might just lose it because they take you out, give it away to everyone. It's very difficult to stop an avalanche. And this is how we have to start looking at changing the world. We don't change it one person at a time. We change it by adding one more person to a collective. We change it by being the observers who can make the difference. Being the people that we have always been, but we have just decided to stand up and be counted. Well, I'm probably preaching to the choir. You know all this already, I have a feeling. And good for you that you do. Anyone else? All right. Then I think we'll close this down for this evening. I have no idea what time I'm supposed to stop, but it's 8:30. It's been a couple of hours, and it's been great fun for me. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. If you're interested in our work, looking for lost cities, you can go to expeditions.tv. It's spelled an X, not an EX. So it's expeditions.tv. And if you want to listen to the radio show, it's real simple, jerrywellsshow.com. That's simple enough. Or you can go to channel-U, which is our new network. Thank you for your time and your kindness and your attention. It is a real privilege to be here with you. The last thing I want to tell you is to be kind to each other. That certainly will allow you to find the greatest resource of who you are inside. Good night, everyone.